Increase the volume, please. Welcome, chat. Welcome, everybody. How y'all doing today? Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Boston. And just a reminder that everything we discuss today on stream is intended to be for educational purposes only, and nothing is intended to be taken as medical advice. Hope y'all are doing well. For those of y'all that are in the continent of North America, I hope y'all had a happy Thanksgiving. We didn't stream yesterday because I was, doing some family stuff. But we can't abandon chat during Thanksgiving, right? So, so we're here today. We're going to stream for a little while. We're just going to be chilling. It's going to be a pretty chill stream, light stream. So just a reminder that if you guys have any medical concerns or questions, please go see a licensed professional. Everything we discussed today is intended to be for educational purposes only. Nothing is intended to be taken as medical advice. Right? So, so I hope y'all are doing well. So here's a couple things that we have for y'all. So we're going to be... So we're back to a normal schedule next week, just in terms of announcements. So it's going to be like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like regular. You rip off your fingernails. That's rough, dude. And just a reminder that we're going to be talking a little bit about this, but that Dr. K's guide is actually giftable now. So if you have someone who's interested in meditation, depression, or wants to learn more about depression or anxiety, you can actually gift it to people. So if y'all are interested in that, send it to a friend or loved one. So today we're going to be doing, let's just check in, just see how are y'all doing today? How's everybody doing? People doing good? A little tired? People are celebrating holidays or not so much? Oh, so this is interesting. So our research director sent me some interesting stats. Okay, you guys should hear this. So there was a study done by the National Alliance of Mental Illness about holiday mental health, but it doesn't seem like there's much published research on it. So this is kind of interesting. So 24% of people diagnosed with a mental illness find that the holidays make their condition a lot worse. And 40% think that the holidays make it somewhat worse, right? So 1 out of 4 people who has depression or anxiety, the holidays are a lot worse. Like another 40% think it's somewhat worse. And it's still 64% of people think that the holidays are worse. So out of 755 people that responded, the holidays make them feel sad or dissatisfied. 68% feel financially strained by the holidays. 66% of people experience loneliness. 63% feel like there's too much pressure. And 57% feel like they're struggling with unrealistic expectations. 55% found themselves remembering happier times in the past, contrasting with the present. And about half of people were unable to be with their loved ones. That's kind of weird, right? We don't, not really sure what is happening there. But it seems like the holidays are not fun for everyone. What kind of meditation do you teach? I teach many kinds of meditation. So I don't teach a kind of meditation, and I think it's a great question, and I think that question actually is embedded with part of the problem of how meditation is taught, is that meditation teachers tend to teach one kind of meditation, which is what they're experts in. But if we look at the human population, there are many different meditation teachers because human beings are different, and not one kind of meditation is going to work for all people. So part of what I teach is I try to tailor meditation techniques to particular problems or people. And I studied several different kinds of meditation techniques because none of them fit 100% with what I wanted to do. So I learned from lots of different teachers. Are we going to meditate today? Yes, I have a very special meditation for y'all today. Very special one. We're going to do a shunya meditation. Shunya is the Sanskrit word for void, null, or zero. So shunya is like the absence of things. So historians generally credit the Indian subcontinent as being the place where the concept of zero was discovered. So they say like Indians, like when I was growing up and I would go to like culturally Indian things, right? Someone would be like, Indians have invented zero. We have done it. So we get to own all of the maths. All of the maths, we have patented zero. Right? So in today's day and age, someone would have tried to patent zero if they discovered it. But so we'll hopefully, Okay, let me think about whether I want to teach you guys this stuff now or later. Let's teach it with the meditation. So we'll talk about like how meditation and Om and stuff like that. Okay, we're going to go off the rails. Actually, I'll ask you guys. So here's our choices for the day, okay? We've got 4 posts. Let me just show y'all real quick. Okay, and then you guys tell me what y'all want to do. So, one post is this. So life isn't a race. It's an RPG, and most of you maxed out the wrong stats. So we're going to talk about if you are someone who has maxed out the wrong stats in life. You know, what should we do for you? How do we think about this? Are y'all GG'd? Is it game over? Do you need to respec? Like, what's going on? How do you redistribute your stats? Excellent question, and the wrong one to ask, right? So, the second one is why I am unable to be content with anything. So this is a case of someone who moves around between different things, like goes into Chad mode in multiple areas and then like abandons it for other stuff. Okay? And so the next one is Dr. K, I feel so underdeveloped socially. I can't even be around family. I feel like I ruined Thanksgiving. I feel like we got to do this one today. And then fourth one has been blathering about 8 years and I finally figured it out. I find myself slipping into an endless cycle of dead-end jobs, blah, blah, blah. And so we can do these, or we can talk a little bit. The fifth thing that I'll toss in is like a weird thing about spirituality and like the origin of shunya and where zero comes from and things like that. So what are y'all feeling? Was binging all your YouTube episodes yesterday? Really good content? Fantastic. Oh my god. Mods. Dude, mods coming in clutch. Okay. Clutch mods. Okay, so this is okay. What we're going to do is we'll do 1, 2, 3, and 5. Okay? And we'll start with Life is an RPG. Fantastic. So we're going to do Life is an RPG. I'm going to vote 2. I voted for the one that I wanted to do. Okay. So let's talk about this. So my stats are kind of screwed up and I'm trying to fix them, but it ain't going well. So life isn't a race, it's an RPG, and most of you maxed out the wrong stats. So like, what do y'all think about this? Like, what are the mechanics? What are the rules of life in advancement? You guys get that? Like, this is an important question. And I think it's a really important question because they don't like teach us what the basic mechanics of how to live life are. So let me give you all an example. So there are a lot of people out there who feel like it's too late. So they feel like, you know, oh my God, like I missed like this milestone, right? Like, oh, I'm 24 and like I haven't graduated from college, therefore like it's too late. People feel like they screwed up. So there's this concept of like, you know, missed milestones, and then people basically feel like once they miss the boat on something, like you can't kind of go and get it back. So this kind of concept entered our consciousness as humanity when people found these, like the wolf children. So there were some like human beings that were raised in the wild and didn't have access or exposure to human language. And what psychologists discovered is that if a human like doesn't get any access or exposure to language by a particular age, they it becomes impossible for them to learn language. That their brain sort of wires in a particular way, and then like a door is forever closed to them. And so the main question is like, is that generally speaking how life works? Like what is the RPG system that best mirrors like how you gain like stats and level up in life? Like what does it actually work like? So I'd say that in general, life is sort of like closest to, for lack of, there may be a better example of this, but like one of these Elder Scrolls games where basically the more you do something, the more you level up in it. So the first thing is like this concept of missed milestones, I think is like not really accurate. So we see this a lot, for example, hopefully this paper will get published soon, but we wrote a paper about incels, where one of the key things about incels, one of the shared experience that they have is that there's a missed milestone of social development. So they feel like, oh, I've never had a girlfriend in high school, or I'm 23 and I've never had a girlfriend, or I'm 23 and never had a boyfriend, whatever. And so since they missed the boat on something, they're like forever screwed. And so what the kind of concept of missed milestone is that after a certain point, there's been an unchangeable course correction, which has doomed you to failure. And therefore you're like never going to succeed. And so we see this a lot within our community where people say like, oh, it's too late for me. Like I'm X number of years and I haven't done X, Y, or Z. So like I'm screwed, right? And so this is another example where people will say like, they'll go back to this kind of concept, which is that, you know, you've spent your time, like you've used your time or spent your time maxing out the wrong stats. So if you spent all of your time like maxing out your League of Legends skill and your, you know, Valorant skill, brought to you by Riot Games, are you basically screwed? And so the short answer, like in my opinion, like the answer is clearly no. So like, let me give you guys a simple example, okay? So like, let's say like I watch a bunch of anime and I sort of passively acquire some amount of Japanese, right? So if you like watch a bunch of anime, like you've like wasted, let's say 4 years watching anime and like you learn a little bit. There's some amount of like passive XP that you get from watching anime. But people who have gone like 4 years of like watching anime and like may be able to, you know, say things like, you know, I'll never forgive you, or sekai no tame ni yurusanezo, or whatever, right? Like you're not actually learning anything. So you can spend like 4 years and then what people will conclude is they'll say like, oh, I've spent 4 years like wasting my time watching. What, chat? Like what do you take me for, huh? You know? Like what? Did you guys think that I'm a poser? Did you not think that I'm one of you? You have to remember, chat, that I'm one of you. It runs deep. It runs deep with me, dude. It goes all the way down to the bottom. One of us. So where was I? Yeah. So like, here's the first thing. It's like there's some amount of passive XP that you get from like doing what you're doing, right? But the key thing here is that, hold on. Zoom. Fixed, saved. Okay. So if we kind of go back to it, if we live our life and we're just sort of like passively leveling up random skills, like skills at video games or like whatever, right? Learning a little bit of Japanese. At the end of the day, you can actually like gain a lot of ground if you just put your mind to it. And we'll get to that in a second. So just to give you guys like a little bit of context, right? About like how I got to where I am. So I played a bunch of video games in high school. Like I didn't know how to play any sports. Like I couldn't like, you know, I didn't play a musical instrument. I sort of like played a little bit of piano, but, you know, stopped playing piano when I was 15 years old. And between like 15 and like graduating high school, like I didn't really learn anything. Like I went to class, passively learned stuff, right? Because you're sitting there in class and you're like passively like learning mathematics. I did the minimum amount of work necessary to pass, or sometimes didn't even pass in high school. And then college rolled around, and then like I was 18, 19, 20. I was like, oh, I'm going to go to college. Like, you know, I'm going to party. I'm going to meet chicks, like all this stuff. And then like my 20th birthday rolled around. I'd never really been on a date, like never really had a girlfriend. And so like, you know, it was maybe I'd been on something like a date, but and so I felt like I was like falling behind, right? I felt like I had kind of missed the boat. And even like years later, when I was like 26 years old, so I graduated at the age of 22 or 23. And then like at 26, I remember going to a holiday party and meeting my friends who I used to be in high school with, who are now like doctors. They were like graduating medical school. And so I had like no job, like net worth of basically zero, like couldn't play an instrument. I'd spent some time in India, which I didn't realize was worth a lot at that time. But I basically, like, on paper, I was worth nothing, right? So I had like a bachelor's degree in neurobiology with like, that was 3 to 4 years old with like no work experience, some work experience, but not really anything significant. So, you know, you kind of like get to that point in life and you're thinking like, wow, I've missed all the milestones and I'm basically screwed. And so I still remember applying to medical school and kind of thinking like, oh, in 4 years, if I graduate, like if I start med school, if I apply at 26, I could potentially get in, because the application cycle is like 1 year, and then you get in for the next year. So most people will apply their junior year of college so that they can start after their senior year. So there's like a 2-year lag time for med school. So I was like, if I apply now, I'll start med school when I'm 28 and I'll finish when I'm 32. And I remember having these thoughts that, oh my God, it's going to be too late. And like, I've screwed up, right? That like, I should have done this such a long time ago. But the truth of the matter is, and then what happens is our mind, once we have that kind of thought, it like demotivates us and we don't feel like doing anything. We're like, oh my God, it's too late. Like I'm GG SOL. I can't recover. But the truth is that in 4 years, like I'm going to be 32 either way. Like it doesn't really matter. Like the real choice is, do I want to be like 32 and have an MD, or do I want to be 32 and not have an MD? Like that's the real choice. But that's not the way that our mind thinks about it, right? All it thinks about is all the time that's passed and all the milestones we've missed. It doesn't really think about, okay, what are the different options for when I'm 32 and which one do I want to pick? So that's really important. If y'all are like kind of feeling like you've missed out and it's too late for you, let's say you're like 25 and you've never been on a date. And then at the age of 30, you've got 2 options. So you're saying, okay, I'm 25, GG, like forever alone, right? Like finished. But then like you could say like, okay, 3 years from now, like you may still be alone or you could not be alone. Like which one would you prefer? And that's what you should move towards. And this is where leveling up comes in, because I don't think that, unlike RPGs, I don't think life has like diminishing, or it doesn't have like exponential more experience required to level up. So I think life is like, you can just accrue skill points whenever you want to by spending time doing the activity. You can level up all of your crafting skills sequentially if you want to. It doesn't really matter. You can just level up whatever you put your mind to. And this kind of goes back to like learning Japanese. So you can like watch anime for 4 years and learn how to say, I'll never forgive you for the sake of the world. Or you can just sit down and literally learn Japanese in 2 months, right? So if you spent like a dedicated amount of time studying Japanese and learning Japanese, you can like become proficient in the language in 60 days. That's all it takes. So this is the concept of deliberate practice, which I think Malcolm Gladwell kind of like popularized, is this idea that like if you put your mind to something, you can accumulate any kind of like skill that you want to. So it doesn't sort of matter that you've spent all of your so this is the other thing, is in life, like skill points are not limited. So in video games, like there's like, oh, we only have like 60 skill points. So how do we want to build them? And if I've spent too much time putting them into video games or like, you know, anime expertise, like I'm screwed because I've used up all my skill points. This is the big thing about life, is that you can farm skill points every single day. Like you can just wake up today and farm a skill point if you want to. And so that's why we see, you know, 2 kinds of people. Like there are people that will excel at many, many, many things, and people who oftentimes excel at nothing. And we'll talk about the middle ground in a second. And so the truth of the matter is that even if you've maxed all of the wrong stats, you can just start maxing up other ones, right? So this is kind of interesting. Like I think, what was it? There's a great quote from like Rome or Sparta or something that, you know, they teach their warriors to be scholars and their scholars should be warriors, because if you're a warrior who hasn't studied things, you're going to be like stupid and you'll make mistakes. And if you're a scholar who's never fought, like your policies won't incorporate like understanding of like combat and stuff like that. So I forget exactly what the quote was, if somebody can remind me, but so I think like that's a really good example of, we have this idea in our mind that human beings can't be both. But the truth of the matter is that you can exercise for 2 hours a day if you want to, and like study for 4 hours a day if you want to, right? Like you can actually do all of it. You don't, there's not a limited number of, there's not a limited number of stat points that y'all have. So even if you've screwed things up, you can still invest it like in cultivating, farming more stat points today. It kind of doesn't matter. Oh yeah, so this is great. So thank you very much. So someone's saying this, oh crap. Yeah, the society that separates its scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools. Faraz R2, come in and clutch. That's exactly the quote that I was thinking of. So there's sort of this idea that we have that there's a limited number of stat points that we have, and if you've wasted them, you can't get more, which is not true. You can learn, you can study Japanese for 3 months and become proficient in it, and then you can go and study Mandarin, and then you can go and study Hindi, and then you can go and study Arabic. And within the span of 1 year, you can be proficient in 4 languages. So this is kind of what we've seen in our coaching program is that that it takes about, so if people are wondering, so if you're someone who has misused your stat points up until this point, the question that a lot of people ask is, okay, how long does it take for me to put my life together? And so this is where I would say there are a couple of different things. The first is that 8 weeks is the amount of time it takes to start moving your life in the right direction. So a lot of people feel like they have inertia, lack of motivation, like they're not really doing anything. 8 weeks is the amount of time that it takes to start moving your life in the right direction. Coincidentally, it also appears that 8 weeks is the amount of time that it takes to start to make neuroscience changes in your brain. Like if you consistently do something for a period of about 8 weeks, your brain will start to change. What we see in our coaching program is that optimal outcomes tend to take about 12 weeks. So even in our content creator program with Twitch, we've lengthened the program for 8 to 12 weeks based on a year of research. So what we sort of discovered is that people start to make change in 8 weeks, and then they're really at a good pace 12 weeks in. So it takes about 3 months to start to put your life together. What we see is in a period of about 40 weeks, if you're focused and put your mind to things, you can make a drastic change to your life. So 40 weeks is like the kind of the minimum amount to turn your life around in my experience. And what I've seen with people time and time again is about 40 weeks to 2 years is what it takes to turn your life around by 180 degrees. So I've had people who were mid-20s, unemployed, never had a job, making 6 figures a year in 2 years, if they just put their mind to it. And so you may wonder, okay, so what is it that changes over the course of 8 to 40 weeks? What are we working on? So I'll give you guys just a couple of examples. So one is that people start working on something that I call the hidden curriculum. So these are the skill points that you invest in things that become super OP. So a good example is how to learn. So if you level up your learning ability, you get an XP buff across all of your different things. Other examples of the hidden curriculum are how to communicate, how to find motivation. So these core aspects of self that if you use deliberate practice on these domains, if you discover how to find motivation, how to communicate, and how to learn, then all of the things after that will become much, much, much better. Over the course of 12 to 40 weeks, what are some neuroscience changes that we see? So a good example is a change in self-talk. So if we look at why people stay stuck, there's a little voice in your head that will encourage you to not do anything, or it will discourage you from making a change because it says things like, oh, it's too late. Oh, don't bother. Look at all these other people. So there's a little voice in your head that actually is sabotaging all of your efforts. So when you work with someone like a therapist or a coach for 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks, or on your own, if you work on your self-talk, it takes time to rewire those neurons in your brain to produce a different kind of self-talk. And what I see with my therapy patients, for example, is 40 weeks into therapy, what starts to happen is they'll start to say something, and then I will ask them a question. They'll say, I knew you were going to ask that. Or I'll say something to them, and they'll be like, I knew you were going to say that. I knew that was coming. I was dreading you saying that. Even when I came into my appointment today, I was going to tell you this. I knew exactly what you would say. So that is a prime example of changing your self-talk, because then their brain is able to produce what I offer them. And so the reason that I tend to work with people for like a year or two is like they become trained in like saying and thinking the way that I do. They basically learn that way of thinking, and then they no longer need me. Then they're like kind of fixed, right? So that's like literally changing your self-talk. So that's just how long it takes. Like you have to have, people will ask questions like, how do I gain confidence in myself? If they grew up in an abusive household where they like were, taught to be not confident, the way that you gain that is by actually exposing yourself to people who are confident in you. So we see this in group coaching a lot, where people are like, I'm here to like, they don't realize this when they come in, but we're teaching them how to change their self-talk. And so that's why group coaching will see a lot of like benefit that seems to happen suddenly without any like warning, like late in the game. 12 weeks, 16 weeks in, people just start making changes in their life, and they're really like, no one understands how it happened. You don't see it coming. So 7 weeks, 8 weeks, people don't feel like they're making any progress, and then suddenly they kind of wake up one day and they're like starting to do really well. And why is that? It's because when you go into group coaching and there are like 10 people there, or 8 people or 6 people that are changing the way that they treat you, that are treating you in a different way, your mind sort of gets a different experience. So this is just kind of to summarize, like, we kind of got off track there, but generally speaking, if you feel like you've lost if you've wasted all your points in life and you've like missed key milestones, the good news is that you can learn basically at any time. Like the idea of age or I'm too old for this, unless you're like, a woman who wants to like bear children or something, like there's some biological, barriers which are very hard to overcome. If you're a 75-year-old woman or a man, I suppose, and you decide that you want to have children, like bear a child, like there may be biological constraints. But outside of that, if you're 25, 30, 35, and you want to go back to college, you want to start becoming a game developer, like, whatever it is that you want to do, deliberate practice and focusing your mind on something will allow you to work on it. You can just always farm up skill points. You just have to start farming. When it comes to turning your life around, I would say 8 weeks is the amount of time it takes to start. You should be rolling by 12 weeks. By 40 weeks, some people will have turned their life around. And give yourself 2 years of deliberate work. And basically people will ask me, they'll come in with like trauma and abuse and like being on drugs and all this stuff. And they're like, my life is nowhere. I'm 26 years old. How do I fix all these problems? And I'll be like, give me 2 years. If in the worst case scenario, it's taken me about 2 years. I'm thinking about some patients of mine that have really had like trauma and addictions and like are unemployed and in their like mid to late 20s, even early 30s. And, in a 2-year time span, they are, in school for something that they really care about. And so I had one patient, for example, who became like a plumber and so would work a lot and then like was making like 80 or $100 an hour and then was also like doing game development on the side. So they're like, their passion is game development. They figured out, okay, I'm going to become a plumber. I'm going to work nights because I'm a night owl anyway. And then the upside of working nights is that 24-hour plumbing services, you get to charge more, right? Because it's like you're showing up at someone's house at 3 a.m. So he'll go to someone's house at 3 a.m, work for 2 hours and make like $500. And then if he doesn't get any calls, he's just working on his game design. And it's like, it's a great life that he's crafted, but it takes about 2 years to get there. So, does that make sense? So at the end of the day, life is an RPG, like that's totally fine. If you've wasted all your stat points in the wrong skills, like that's okay too. You can just farm up more stat points. All it takes is deliberate practice and patience. How's Vancouver? I don't know, man. I like Vancouver. Seems like a random question. Yeah, so everyone who's talking about respecking, so everyone who's talking about respecking, you don't need to respec, right? So you don't need to respec anything in life. You can just gain more points. You don't have to give anything up to learn something new. You guys get that? Like, it's not like if you study Japanese and then you study Spanish, you automatically, like, your brain does not have space for the Spanish, so it like overwrites the Japanese. If you don't practice the Japanese, you'll lose it because your brain is going on like cleanup crew, but you don't. This is interesting because in video games, there's like an artificial cap to how many skill points you can get. It's not that way in life. Okay, so what's the difference between deliberate practice and practice? So there's like intentional practice, and then there's just practicing mindlessly. So I'll give you guys just a simple example. You could take two people who play Dota. Both of them can have. I can take two people who play Dota, and one of them will just play for 2,000 hours, and then they'll like even out their MMR, and they'll never climb, right? So if you like play Dota, there are people who play Dota for 10,000 hours and are like 1K MMR. Those people exist. And then there are people who will play 500, will start out at 1,000 MMR, will play 500 hours, but then they will be at like 5K MMR. So what's the difference? The difference is like deliberate practice. So the people who actually try to get better versus just like passive XP. So I'd call it like passive XP. So like another good example is watching anime and just like passively letting your brain absorb some amount of Japanese versus sitting down and like opening up a Japanese textbook and actually studying it. That's the difference between just mindless grinding and deliberate practice, right? So I'll give you guys just another example. So let's say becoming a psychiatrist. So psychiatrists have not had more conversations than the average person, right? Like everyone's having conversations. It's not like other humans have talked more than I have or interacted with human beings more than I have. What's the difference between a psychiatrist and a normal person? A psychiatrist is someone who deliberately practices communication. So deliberate practice is like focusing and trying to learn and like putting your energy into getting better versus just doing something. Good questions. Psychiatrists are paid to talk. That is true, but remember that becoming a psychiatrist, like going to medical school, is something you pay for, right? So the skills acquisition doesn't necessarily have to do with compensation. In fact, it's usually the other way around. So like becoming a plumber, you have to become a plumber first before you get paid. Okay, so what if I try to get actively better at something, League of Legends, am very passionate about ranking up, but it's still 1K MMR after thousands of hours, then you don't know how to practice or you don't know how to learn, right? So this is where I talk a little bit about the hidden curriculum. So we're not taught how to study, how to learn, how to communicate, how to find motivation. So there may be things that you don't know about learning. That's the first thing that you need to do. So you need to level up your learning skill. And once you level up your learning skill, then like everything becomes easier. So Nacho Ice Cream says, I think school ruined the love of learning for me. Is there a way to get it back? Yes. So if learning has been ruined for you and you don't know how to get it back, there are two things you can do. The first is go back and process, emotionally digest the process of being ruined, right? So it's almost like think about it almost like trauma therapy, where you can even go to a therapist and talk to them about like, hey, I don't enjoy learning anymore. Because remember that if you don't enjoy it, that means that your brain has had certain experiences which like have not been positively reinforced, right? So what you can do is go and digest those samskars, or digest those like micro traumas, or call them whatever you want to, and like process like why school wasn't fun for you. So once you let go of that emotional digestion, or once you digest those emotions and like let go of those emotions, learning can be fun for you. This is another example of like stuff they don't teach you. Like how do you get over stuff, right? They don't teach you this stuff. Second thing that you can do is create other positive experiences of learning in environments outside of school, right? So this may be a little bit harder, or arguably even easier, where if you can go and like, let's say, learn in a different scenario, like if you go to, let's say, like a martial arts class, or you go to like a dance class or something like that, and you're going to be learning and you're going to be growing, it won't be in a school environment. And then like you can start to like build up positive reinforcement for learning. So you can kind of digest the negative or fix the positive, or build the positive. Is there such a thing as talent? Of course. Of course there's talent. Of course there's inborn advantages. How do you level up your learning? Okay, good question. So so for people interested in leveling up their learning, we have, I would recommend the Path of Nyan. So the Path of Understanding and Dr. K's Guide to Meditation. So we'll give you guys like help you understand the nature of learning. Like, how does learning happen? Like, what's going on? And even like how you can optimize your learning. So that's why the things that are like the most foundational are the things that we want to put into the guide, because that way anyone can access them at any time. So there are only like 2 or 3 videos about it, but that's like a solid foundation. It comes with understanding like the nature of learning. The Jnanapada. Yeah, that's correct. I like trains. Just learn how to learn. Yeah, so that's the first thing you should learn. Does exclamation point guide work? Yeah, there. Okay, so let's do next one. So I think a lot of these questions are relating to our next post. Okay? All right. Okay. We may have to bust out the iPad for this one. Okay. All right. So, why am I unable to be content with anything? As the title suggests, I've recently come to the realization that I have a habit of ruining good things in my life because I become discontent with them. For years, I've worked in commission sales environments and have actually left the same job multiple times for no real reason. I have a job where I can easily be a top performer and make over $100K a year with minimal effort. However, I always fall into the same mindset of beginning to hate the job for no real reason, and I do things in the job that get me in trouble on purpose to bait them into firing me. What is wrong with me? I do not work excessive hours at the job, and it is beyond easy for my skill set, and I'm still unhappy with it. This has happened at multiple other jobs I've had as well. I will become very good at whatever job it may be, lose interest, and then self-sabotage my way out of it. This sort of behavior follows outside of work too. Hobbies, for example, result in the same way. Whether it is guitar, a specific video game, video editing, every interest I've ever had results in me becoming good at something quickly, then sabotaging my way out of it. I once got into powerlifting obsessively. It was all I ate, slept, and breathed for multiple years. I became the strongest guy in the gym without even being the biggest. Then one day it just snapped and I stopped going and caring altogether, ruining my health in the process. Even in video games, I follow the same trend. In League of Legends, for example, I will one-trick a single champion until I get to Diamond, and then I will completely lose interest and start inting games down to Gold or Plat because I lost the passion to get better. I am now 26 years old, and I feel as though I've come to a point where I have nothing to show for myself in life because I cannot keep a passion for anything. In addition, I have no desire to work, play video games, or exist anymore. I'm not suicidal and do not have suicidal thoughts, but I also do not particularly enjoy life. Apologies if this is long-winded, but TLDR, I've never been able to be content with anything, and I have pretty much nothing for me to look forward to in life anymore, which makes me feel like I'm just treading water for the sake of treading water. Okay. All right, so chat, what do y'all think about this? What do y'all think is going on here? True AF. So, this is a case that is very important. This is a very important post. And here's the reason why this post is very important. Okay? So, hold on, chatars. I'm going to start over in a second. Give me a second, chat. So what do y'all think? Wanting to be jack of all trades. Okay. So what I want to talk to y'all about today is what I would call I don't know if this is the right word, but almost like the in-between people. Okay. So this is a case of someone who is able to grind really hard, right? So like, and become successful in something and then ends up like abandoning it or sabotaging it. So the first thing to understand is that in our community, we tend to have two groups of people, or we tend to talk about two groups of people. One is the I'm going nowhere in life. This is your NEET person, your hikikomori, Nini person. Like, I'm 24, I play video games all day. Like, how do I get a job? How do I find love? Like, how do I socialize? Like, so we have this perception in our community that like there's a lot of people who are like this. At the opposite end of the spectrum, we have like someone else in our community who's sort of the high performer, right? So this is someone that we saw in our high performance group, high potential group. These are like engineers, like software programmers, like other successful people, like sometimes investment bankers and other randos in our community. Professional poker players, like crypto savants, like all kinds of other people in our community who are like successful. But the truth is that halfway between those two things is what I'd call like the halfway successful person. And this person is like not able to, I'd say, like build a dynasty. So they're not able to, let me kind of put it this way. Okay. So at one side, we have the NEET, right? Not in no employment, education, training. And then over here, we have what I would call the dynasty builder. And what do I mean by dynasty? So this is a case of someone who has a success, and they build on top of it. So over time, like they're able to like build a life, right? Like, I have a successful career, check. I have a successful relationship, check. I'm gonna, I have like good family relationships, check. Now I need to figure out entertainment, yes. And then up here is like dharma, I need meaning. So these are our successful people over here. The truth is that the majority of our community is actually somewhere around here. And these are what I'd call the half performers. So they're not like incapable of getting jobs. They're not incapable of forming relationships, but they're not able to build on their successes. And why is that, right? What's going on with these people? So let's kind of go back to this and take a look. So what do you guys think motivates this person, right? So what do y'all see? So it's not self-sabotage. So self-sabotage, they're motivated towards self-sabotage, but what motivates this person? What do you guys think? Okay, this is really interesting, right? So now people are saying progress. They're saying improvement. They're saying the grind. They're saying validation. Very good, right? So let's take a look at this post. What do we see here? Top performer, right? Let's look at this. I become very good. Okay. And then let's like, every interest I've had becomes becoming good at something quickly. Quickly skill up. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to move this thing over here. So I've been taking some notes. So we can see that what motivates this person is a sense of progress, improvement, grind, validation, wanting to be at the top, diamond. So the other thing that I want you guys to notice is that many of this person's, like their language all involves comparison. So they use words like diamond. They use words like top. They'll use words like become the best, become better. So fundamentally, there's a lot of comparison going on. This will become important in a second. But if we kind of think about it, so this person's saying like, I don't understand, like I'm not motivated, I sabotage things. Incorrect. You have to understand that you're not motivated, you're motivated by a particular thing. And what is this person motivated by? Progress and improvement. So this is kind of interesting because people will say, like, people will assume, for example, like the NEETs, for example, will be like, I can't get motivated to do anything. So I wish I was progress oriented. I wish I was growth oriented. I wish I could grind, right? People value or envy these qualities. They wish they wanted to become very skilled. Like, think about how awesome this is. Like for the NEET, they're like, oh my God, this person can quickly skill up. We had a question earlier about someone being stuck at 1K MMR. And here's this person who's like able to get to the top and then they self-sabotage and whatever. So it's kind of interesting because actually what this person is motivated by is what the NEETs crave. Okay? So then the question is like, what's going on here? Why do they abandon things if they're motivated towards growth? So I'm going to draw you guys a curve. Okay? So if this axis is effort and this axis is progress, what does this curve look like? Can you all tell? What do you guys think? Beginning is the easiest. Very good. Exponential. Yes. And there's an asymptote here. Right? So this is the problem. So what do you guys think this person does? So you may look at this person, you may say like, oh, they're interested in games. They learn instruments. They find jobs. And they look at all these different things and they're like, I can do anything for like 1 year. Bodybuilding. So what's going on here? What's going on is they're on this curve, right? So like this is the bodybuilding. So they start here. I get to the strongest person in the gym and then there's a gap, right? So they hit the exponential phase of the curve. And so now what happens is the more effort they put in, the less gain they get. Because this is what's rewarding. Everyone wants progress, right? So now what they end up doing is they're like, oh, at this point, their brain is making a calculation that at this point, now I'm in the red zone, which means that I have to put in a bunch of effort to get a very little yield. So then what their brain does is, oh, let's like switch. Let's start playing LOL. Oh, here we go. Oh, that's some good shit. Oh, ooh, look at because I'm kind of a Chad and I can like focus and I can be motivated and look at how much effort I have to expend. I have to expend very little effort to make a lot of progress. And as soon as they get good at something, they decide to abandon it. So this is the problem of like a lack of a dynasty builder, right? Because at some point, what their brain just tells them is, hey, instead of investing, like, because notice they just get to diamond, right? They're not getting to challenger, right? They say they're the top performer. They're making 100K a year. They're not making $1 million. So they're never actually becoming the best at something. They're just getting like decently good. They work until they hit somewhere along this point in the curve. And then their mind is like, oh, it'll be easier if we just switch gears to something else because then we can get that sweet, sweet progressium. Addicted to the grind. Absolutely. And so they get stuck in this place. Right? You guys see that? And so this is why this person hops. And so if you want to understand the self-sabotage, it's like, self-sabotage is an easy way to quit. You guys get that? Because if they quit, what ends up happening is they'll feel bad. They'll be like, oh, I'm a quitter. But hey, chat, this is progressium. I'm not a quitter. So what I'm going to do is going to get fired. And then I have a reason, I have an excuse to, okay, like I just got fired from my job. Let me be positive. Let me be growth-oriented. Okay, I'm going to start bodybuilding. And you see, I'm not like those other losers that just like sits around and like, wah, wah, like, oh my God. No, I'm going to like do something with my life. And so then they pick the next thing. And then what happens is like they don't get bored with it. What happens is they get to this phase of the curve where effort does not yield a lot of gain. And so they switch to something else. So now the question is, okay, what do we do about this? And this is the key thing. It's about comparison. Okay? So if you want to understand how to break out of this, the first thing you've got to do is, first of all, have an awareness of this curve and start to ask yourself questions like, why am I self-sabotaging? Is this the point at which I feel like effort does not equal reward? Right? Is this the phase that I'm getting at? Is this what determines what triggers the self-sabotage? Because what I'm noticing in this person is that, like, you guys get that what's motivating this person is not a love for any of these things. They're not actually getting motivated by, like, wanting to play League. They're not getting motivated about wanting to be healthy. They're not getting motivated for the love of the thing at all. All they're getting motivated for is this. Let's see. Becoming good at something. Okay? I became the strongest guy. So it's about comparison. It's about rising above people. And then I stopped caring and going at all. I'll single trick champion, I get to diamond. So it's all about achievement, comparison, and like ranking against other people. So this is a problem of ego. Okay, so there are a couple of things you can do here. So the first is, ask yourself what motivates you. So really, as you are doing any one of these activities, start to ask yourself, like, what is it what do I enjoy about this? Why is this no longer fun for me? And it's not just looking here, because what the person is looking at is they're focusing on this phase, right? This is another problem in terms of how to learn. What we always look at in humans is the area that we make mistakes. Because this is broken. But if we really want to understand ourselves, we have to look at this part too. So, when are things going good? Right? So you need to examine that. Like, what motivates me right now? Like, why do I want to be the best power lifter in the gym? Like, what appeals to me about this? It's not just about the quitting. It's about the positive motivation as well. So you can ask questions like, what feels good about it? Okay? And so you can start to do internal exploration. You can do this with a coach, with a therapist as well. All right, so I'd say the Atman Pada, if this is a problem that y'all struggle with, check out the Atman Pada. So the Atman Pada is the path of self in Dr. K's guide to meditation. Also, for people, for the last one, if you feel like you've fallen behind, there's a video and there's some stuff in the depression guide about like this concept of falling behind and how to get past that. So you can do these kinds of things. And then the other thing that I'm going to teach you is a meditation. So the other thing is that comparison is about ego, right? So the other thing is that this person wants to be better than other people. So as long as like you being better than other people is your primary driver, what you do is going to be fundamentally controlled by other people. Do y'all understand this? So we're going to switch gears for a second and kind of like talk about ego for a second. So if your goal is to be a top performer, that means that what you do is determined by the crappiness of the other performers. It has nothing to do with like objective skill in a thing. It's just wanting to be the best. So if I'm motivated by being the best and I'm in a math class with 6-year-olds, I'm not going to learn much math, right? If I want to be the strongest in a class and I'm in a class with 6-year-olds, it's not going to motivate me at all to like work, right? Like I'm not going to work out. I don't need to work out. I'm fighting against 6-year-olds. I'm racing against 6-year-olds. I'm playing basketball against 6-year-olds. Like, so this concept of like ego and wanting to be the best fundamentally causes you to lose control over your life. It's a huge problem because then your perception of like you being the best is ultimately what motivates you. That means it's not internal motivation, it's external motivation. Okay? So then the question is like, how do we get rid of this ego? So the ego is also comparative, things like that. There's stuff in the meditation guide about ahamkar and Vedic psychology. You guys should definitely watch that if this is interesting to you. So what do you do about this? So this is where I'm going to teach you guys about shunya. So shunya is null, void, or zero. And this is kind of weird. So shunya was discovered in India, so historians will sort of credit India with the discovery of zero. But the interesting thing is that zero was not discovered by like mathematicians in India. It was discovered by yogis. So what happened is like yogis like will meditate for a while and they discovered like the concept of nullness, void, or zero, like the absence of things. And the way that they essentially discovered the concept of absence of things is through explorations of their identity. What yogis essentially did is they like sat down and they tried to figure out, who am I? So they noticed, okay, there's this thing called the ego, which likes to compare. So like some of my identity is based on comparison to other people. I'm tall, I'm short. So when people identify with qualities like tall and short, do you guys get that like you can't be tall or short unless other people existed? The whole word tall or the whole word short has within its concept a comparison to something else. You guys get that? So in that way, all of the qualities that we use to describe ourselves are fundamentally comparative. So even concepts like gender, so male or female, like male doesn't mean anything if there is not a female. Female doesn't mean anything if there isn't a male. Finger doesn't mean anything unless there's a toe. Toe doesn't mean anything unless there's a finger. So all of these concepts are comparative by nature. So what the yogis essentially discovered through meditation is that there is a sense of nullness or void, and that this is like a primary quality of existence. And this is where like the meditation stuff gets kind of weird. So if people want to understand like what is Om, people will say it's the fundamental sound of the universe, or the fundamental vibration of the universe. Like, what on earth does that mean? And this is where things get like kind of really off the rails, is when you do shunya meditation, you will see shunya in things. It's kind of hard to describe, but like, I would say, there are these big level concepts, which are like, so let me just give you guys an example. So one is like energy. So energy is like a high level concept. Like you can see energy in different places. There's like gravitational potential energy. There is electrical energy. There is like magnetic energy. Like energy is like a big thing, right? It's like a high level concept. And so in that way, shunya is another like high level concept. Energy and null are like two very different things. They're not like in the same ballpark at all. So what the yogis essentially figured out is that there's like a set of like basic qualities in the universe. So one is like the energy principle. One is this concept of null or shunya. One is, what's another example of like, another one is duality. So duality is like another example of like a broad level thing that can't be compared to energy, but it's just the fact that like two things exist. And that duality is essentially false. So tall and short is another good example, right? So like you as human beings, we can group the world into like division. Like we can divide things. So we can say that something is tall, something is short, something is red, something is green. This person has black hair, this person is old, young. So our mind divides the world into duality. So duality is like sort of a fundamental quality, not really of the world, but that's a little bit complicated. But do you guys get how like shunya, energy and duality are like three different buckets that don't really relate to each other? So what the yogis essentially did is discovered these like fundamental different buckets, and there's a limited number of them. So what are all the buckets? All of these buckets became the mantras that they said. So there's like one mantra for energy, there's one mantra for duality, there's one mantra for shunya. These are like fundamental qualities of existence. And then under the common element that binds all of these things together is Om. And how do you understand that? It's like you do the shunya meditation, you do the energy meditation, you do the duality meditation, and then you actually discover, there's like existence threads between all three of these things, right? So like there is some amount of existence in all three of these things. So even if it's duality, even if it's shunya, even if it's like energy, there's like something exists. And so that's when people said, that quality of existence is something that we're going to call Om. So that's when people say like Om is the fundamental like vibration of existence. What that literally means is like it's the quality of that which exists. So if someone's saying, I'm so confused, I apologize. I told you we'd go off the rails. So these are things that if you really want to understand, it's not like a logical understanding. It's a like subjective experience that you'll understand. So I'm going to teach you guys a shunya meditation. So if you really want to understand this stuff, you have to do this meditation, and then you will start to experience the void, for lack of a better term, okay? And then like once you like experience it, like then you'll get it, right? It's kind of, yeah. Okay. So we're going to do shunya meditation, all right? So I want you guys to sit up straight. This is not in the guide. So there's some stuff, but shunya is not in the guide. I don't think, anyway, maybe a little bit. Okay, you can take headphones off, it's fine. All right, so what I want y'all to do is sit up straight. Okay, close your eyes. And the first thing that I want you to do is just notice whatever your senses are picking up outside of you. So even if you want to, you can open your eyes briefly, but I want you to notice that, for example, you're able to hear sounds, right? So like listen to the sound of my voice, or even with your eyes closed, like reach out in front of you and like maybe touch the desk, touch something, and just notice that like this object exists outside of you, right? So just feel it and kind of notice that this thing is out here, but I am the one that is experiencing whatever the sensory input is. So I am the one who's doing the touching, and the object is the thing that gets touched. Right? I am the listener, and there are sounds outside. So there's the outside world, which is sending sensory input into you. So take a moment to touch an object around you. Listen to the sound of my voice. Maybe notice a smell. And that fundamentally there are things outside you, and your sensory organs are the entry point of things outside you to within you. I know it sounds kind of basic, but like recognize that which you touch is not part of you, right? You just have contact with it. The words that you hear are not part of you. You simply have contact with them. And now what we're going to do is focus on the sensory apparatus. So notice that you have ears that are capable of hearing, right? So we're not going to focus on the sound itself or my words, but just the fact that you're able to hear. So where do you do the hearing? What is your experience of hearing? If you're using the sense of touch, as you touch, notice that the sensations that you feel are not the table. You don't actually feel the table. What you feel is you touching the table. That there are tactile sensors within your fingers that will feel pressure and warmth or cold or temperature. And that's not actually the object, it is your perception of the object. And so what I want you to do is push lightly against an object near you. And feel the sensation across your fingers. Rub an object around you, and once again feel the sensation across your fingers. And now what I want you to do is go even one layer deeper. And notice that even without touching something, so relax your hands, maybe fold them in your lap, adopt a mudra if you prefer, and notice that your fingers and hands generate signals without any external contact. So now we've left the external world completely behind. And notice that your hands have a proprioceptive sense, which means you can tell where they are in space. You can feel where your hands are. Whether they're above your head, in your lap, you know where your body is. And even without any kind of external contact, your body generates signals that tell you where you are. You can know where your hands are. You can know where your fingers are because they're sending you signals. They're letting you know, hey, I'm here. Hey, I'm here. Hey, I'm here. And now I want you to travel up your arms. So start with your hands, then focus on your forearms and notice that your forearms exist. And then move up to your elbows. And now notice all the signals that your body is sending you. And then up to your arms. And you may even feel uncomfortable, like moving. If you want to, you can go ahead and move. And now up to your shoulders. And now into the chest or upper abdomen. And this is where the practice becomes difficult. So if you are a veteran meditator, this may be accessible to you. If not, you can just practice for this next part. And so notice that the sensations in your body, that there's a black box kind of in the middle of your body, that you may feel hunger or fullness in your stomach. And you may experience like some sensation in the upper chest around your lungs. But actually in the core of your being, notice that there's like a complete absence of sensation. That there is something that sends you no signals whatsoever. It's just the only way you can notice it's there is because if you follow the sensations of the body, they stop at some point. And in the core of your being, there is a hollowness. And now focus on that point. Focus on that sensation. And now ask yourself, what is that? Notice that your body and your mind signal to you that they exist, either through the presence of thoughts or physical sensations. But how is it that you can feel nothing at the core of your being? And meditate upon that thing. We'll practice for another minute or so. And now externalize your attention again. Start to come out of that place. Return to your body. Go up the chest to the shoulders, arms, elbows, forearms, fingers. Listen to the sound of my voice and notice that the world begins to exist again. Go ahead and come on back. All right, so I'm going to ask y'all a couple of questions if you really want to understand Shunya. So, first question is, who was able to feel Shunya? Okay, so it's okay for not everyone to feel it. So now let me ask y'all a question. For those of you that were able to feel Shunya, there was Shunya within, right? So tell me, what is outside of you? Where else can Shunya be? right? So if you understand what shunya feels like, you will notice that it is everywhere. So like now you're starting to get it. Because what the yogis essentially discovered, so when they say that reality is false and they call reality Maya or illusion, that is fundamentally, that can be discovered. If you want to understand why reality is an illusion or this concept of Maya, do this shunya practice. Because then you'll begin to see, oh shit, none of this crap is real. Right? Because it's shunya. It's void. It's null. And then what happens, once you have that realization, everything that bothers you in the world ceases to bother you. It's transformative. And then suddenly, like, these things that used to restrict you, like, oh, like, I want to be the best. Like, the best is not a real thing. It's silly. Right? And so this is how you become free of ahamkar. Right? It's like, it's freeing. So this is why people call samadhi or moksha freedom. Enlightenment. It's understanding. And with the understanding comes the freedom and the bliss. So this is the other weird thing, is that we think about, in logic, happiness, knowledge, and freedom are like 3 dimensions, right? Those are not the same thing. Like freedom and happiness are not part of the same scale. Like they're like 3 qualitatively different things. But moksha is the place where all 3 of these things meet. And if you want to understand that, you do this shunya practice. For those of you, I understand it's hard. It's like an advanced practice. But if you like understood that shunya is on the outside, you'll begin to see like, oh crap, if it's scary, then you're doing it right. Because what that means is like true freedom and like happiness are like there. You just have to pick them up. But you're not ready to. And so then the question becomes, why aren't you ready to pick it up? What is it that holds you back? If you are scared of embracing shunya, what is it that is frightened? Very good, right? So some people get it. The ego. Right? So what wants to control? The ego wants to control. Shunya doesn't need to control. The ego. So for those of you that are able to follow along, now you understand how the shunya practice will dissolve your ego. Because in order to embrace it, you have to let go of that which holds on. And then you get to detachment. You guys get that? Like that's like people ask, how do you detach? This is how you detach. But unless you understood the meditation, you're not going to understand. I could tell you guys time and time again, here's how you detach, here's how you detach. You won't understand it. Like you're not going to get it. For those of you that get it, now you understand what the nature of attachment is. If you want to understand what attachment is, it is that which is terrified of shunya. Does that make sense? No, we're going to do maybe one more question. Is it possible to be too detached? Yes and no. The only thing that is concerned about being too detached is the ego. So it's worried about being too detached, but so what? Too detached means that you're measuring it against something. Do you guys get that? Like, what does it mean to be too detached? That means that there's an appropriate level of attachment. Who determines the appropriate level of attachment? The ego does. Because it's like, I want to be this detached. You guys get that? Because here's what's happening in the ego. The ego is like, I want to be detached enough to where I can be successful in life and get the things that I want to, but I don't suffer. So there's a perfect level of detachment. That's how spiritual I want to be. I want to be spiritual so I can have all of my desires satisfied and be like materialistic. I want to use spiritual growth as a means to a materialistic end. That's what the ego does. Right? I want to meditate so I can get promoted at work. I want to meditate so I experience less anxiety. I want to meditate so that I don't have social anxiety so I can meet someone and get laid. It's all hijacking spirituality for its own materialistic ends. This is why the world is filled with false spirituality now. And the more that people have recognized the value of meditation, the worse this problem has become. The ego isn't cancer. It's just that which shackles us. Right? And so, like, here's the big thing. Are you okay being shackled? So how do we hold the shunya? Okay, so there's different questions here, all right? So one is like, some of these are questions from people who I think like have understood it, and some is like from people who haven't quite understood, which is okay. I'm not trying to say that one is better than the other. It just may not be the meditation technique for you, right? It's like, not everyone is a mage. It's like, here's a mage staff, and if people are into being a mage, they're like, oh, this is great. For fighters, they're like trying to melee people with their mage staff, and they're like, I don't understand this, which is totally fine. No judgment, right? So one is, how do we hold the shunya? That's a good question. You practice. Holding the shunya is absolutely the goal. So this person has understood it. But why is spiritual growth even worth it? You haven't even addressed that yet? Yeah. Worth it means what? Worth it to whom? Worth it for what end? Worth implies like worth it for what? And so the answer is spiritual growth is not worth it, because spiritual growth is not interested in the it. The whole goal of spiritual growth is to abandon the it, right? To exist without a goal. So that's like, I haven't addressed that because I can't. It's not worth it by definition. It is what spirituality is letting go of things being worth it. Okay, so now this person is asking, doesn't the ego stop us from getting into situations that will kill us? Absolutely. So now we're going to take a page from science, okay? So ego is a universal experience of all human beings, right? So why is that? It's because the ego has been selected for by evolution. Ego is what helps us survive. So it's absolutely evolutionary. Like, so if we think about, becoming successful in life, you want your ego. Like, the truly enlightened baby will never become, well, they'll still become successful. That's another paradox we'll get to in another day. But it is the chase for success that the ego wants, right? And so, like, there's a reason why it evolved. It evolved because it helps us survive. It has survival utility, but it doesn't have happiness utility. So ego helps us survive, but doesn't make us happy, because we've evolved to not be happy. We've evolved to survive. And this is the core problem with being a human being in the world today, is that this body and this brain and this mind are not designed for happiness. They're designed for survival. And everyone is looking for happiness using an instrument that was designed for something else. That's why it's hard. That's why spirituality is something that you have to work towards. Right? Because it's not like, it's like, we're living out of the back of our car. It's not what it was designed for. The car was designed for movement, and here we are trying to use it for something else. So this is the fundamental problem of being human, is that everything within you is designed for survival. It's not designed for contentment or happiness. So now you have to decide, like, and everyone's going to have to make their own journey and their own decision, like, what do you want to chase? Do you want to chase the ego? Or do you want to go ahead and let it go? Do you want to embrace shunya, or do you want to be successful? And it's a decision that every person has to make. So this is the problem that Buddha had, as he chased, so this is Buddha's conclusion, is that you can chase success as much as you want to, but it's never going to get you anywhere. Because he rose to the top, right? He was like a king, and powerful, and respected, and lucky, and wealthy. And he was like, I'm still unhappy. And so he decided to choose happiness. Not everyone has to choose happiness. Some people choose power. Totally fine. It's your choice. You decide. What is the purpose of the ego? The ego is a huge survival benefit, right? It's like very, very helpful that way. Why not both? Yeah, you could try to do both. Can you choose both? Sure. There's not the real answer is that it's not really a choice. It's like even that is like it's hard to describe, but like it's shunya, right? It's all nothing. So there's no both. There's neither. Right? So these are all constructions. All of these questions are coming from the construction of an egotistical mind. Right? So like I'm totally fine. Like, so here's the problem. We're going to get back to regular stuff. So I told y'all we're going to go off the rails today. So this is the thing. So like this is the challenge we have at Healthy Gamer and HG is like, do we go down this road for the people who have been here for a while, right? Or do we do the same old crap? So we got to like throw a bone to the people who have been here for a while and meditate on a regular basis and stuff like that. Even if we lose some of y'all along the way, which I apologize. Like it, you know, I can't, if I'm teaching to 3,000 people, I can't have one thing that's effective for everyone. Right? So this is some cult level stuff. So what I would love to do is like, these are the kinds of things that ideally are not taught on stream, but like if we ever do like a retreat, right? Some real cult stuff, like we'll have like, ideally we'd have a retreat for people who are long-term community members and meditate on a regular basis so we can do advanced topics. So the key point here is that if you've done the Shunya meditation, you understood it, then continue doing it. And then you will find the answers to all these questions. And then if you didn't get it and you're like, what the hell is going on? That's totally fine. Please accept my apologies and we'll get on to other things. It's not like some people, so be careful about the ego now. So some of you may be thinking, oh, I'm one of the ones who got it. Oh, I'm going to go to Dr. K's special retreat and be inducted into the cult. Wonderful. That's ego too. Right? There's no better or worse. It's just different levels. It's just like different people. Right? It's already failed. Absolutely. That's why I'm pointing it out. You guys get that? It's like, you see how sneaky the ego is? Now that we're active and you're not meditating, the ego will find its way in. Some of y'all are going to be feeling bad and some of y'all are going to be feeling Chad. Right? But it's all ego. It's just what you are. You moved away from Shunya if you're feeling Chad. And you moved away from Shunya if you're feeling bad. Have I managed to balance the ego and spirituality? That's such a good question. Let me think about how I would describe my experience. Here's the way that I experience ego. So I have a garden and I try to grow things in it, and periodically like some animals and stuff like rabbits and stuff will come and eat all of my effort. That rabbit is my ego. Occasionally I'll try to get things done and then the ego shows up and like torpedoes everything that I'm trying to do. But then like much like the rabbit, it's just trying to live too. So I can sigh and I can be like, well, that sucks, but at least the rabbit got to eat these awesome carrots and sweet potatoes. Right? It's okay. I have an ego. It gets the better of me many times, which it's going to do. Because I've decided that I'm not going to, be a monk. So it's like, that's the price that I pay. So it's okay. It belongs. It deserves to be there. All right. I see this chat, Amanzur. I see you, the all-seeing eye of Sauron. So how do you know if it's the voice of ego or it's the good voice in your head? With practice. You begin to see what the rabbit looks like. And then you can understand, oh, did I do this or is this the rabbit? So remember that the real goal is not to get rid of your ego. It's to be in control of your ego. So your ego should be like listen to you instead of the other way around. When you say a monk, I think it depends on the monk. Okay. So I'll give y'all a choice. We've got the Thanksgiving one, right? So I feel socially underdeveloped. I can't even be around family. I feel like we got to do that one. That's a good one. Or we can answer more questions. But I don't want to leave people behind if people don't understand What if I didn't get shunya, but if I practice, can I understand it eventually? Yes, absolutely. Just takes practice. Questions. Okay, let's do questions. All right. Okay. I do the meditation for 20 minutes a day, if people are curious about how long to do it. Good book to read? I may have an answer for y'all in about a year about a good book to read about this topic. Give me a year to answer that question. I'll find something for y'all to read. Give me a year though. Okay. Dr. K, I feel so underdeveloped socially, I can't even be around family. I feel like I ruined Thanksgiving. This just happened minutes ago as of writing this. Thanksgiving, dinner time, the table is set and everyone's gathering around. It's not a full house. It's just me, my parents, older sister and her boyfriend, and finally 2 younger siblings. Now, to preface the title of this post, I've always been uncomfortable in social gatherings. I was never able to communicate with others unless they spoke to me, and I only have 5 friends my whole school life. My whole high school life. When it came to events like guests or special occasions, basically when lots of people would be around, I was always quiet and tried to never speak and hide almost in the back of the room. And this was something I did most Thanksgivings. I have memories of being asked to sit down with the family and don't be uncomfortable, we're your family. This Thanksgiving, however, I feel like I ruined everything. After food was set on the table and everyone sat down, including myself, we began eating, except I wasn't eating. Everyone around me had a full plate except me. Clean plate. I felt so uncomfortable that I couldn't move my body to make my plate and eat in front of anyone. I couldn't speak, couldn't look at anyone, nothing. And eventually, after a few minutes, my mother, who sat next to me, said, "I suddenly don't feel good," and covered her face in her arm. This made my father get up and comfort her, and I hear slight sniffling as if she was crying. And then my father helped her out of her seat into the bedroom to lay down. Once that happened, Thanksgiving was over, cut short because I couldn't be a part of the family. I walked out of the room and started to cry at the thought. Thoughts like, what's wrong with me and it's my fault. I love my parents and my family, and it feels like all my fault. I feel so socially inept and feel like a failure. How do I become comfortable or better at social situations so that I don't feel uncomfortable with my own family? Okay. So this is a tough post, but I think a really, really good and important one. So this is a case where someone is blaming themselves for, as they put it, ruining Thanksgiving. They feel socially inept. They feel socially inept. They feel like they screwed everything up, and they feel like their social anxiety is preventing their family from having a good time. So let's try to unpack this a little bit, because I think there's a couple of important things that we kind of need to acknowledge here, okay? So the first, let's understand anxiety. So when we become anxious, our mind tends to, first of all, fill in the unknown with some of the worst possibilities, okay? So this is like something that's really important to understand about anxiety. If I'm anxious, for example, and let's say that I'm waiting for someone to pick me up to go to a party, and no one shows up, what the anxious mind does is fills it in with like the worst possibility. So the reason they didn't pick me up is because they don't like me, and they're all sitting in their car and laughing about me because they didn't really bring, they don't want me there and things like that. So what the anxious mind does is fills in the unknown with the worst possibility. That's the first thing to understand. The second thing to understand here is like what's going on in this person and like what's going on in this post. So our brain has this part called the default mode network. And the default mode network is the part of our brain that allows us to be self-aware. So I know it sounds kind of weird, but like, deer, for example, aren't really able to reflect too much about themselves. So they can think about like food and danger and weather and stuff like that, but their ability to like think about themselves is underdeveloped compared to humans. So there's potentially recent research that suggests that more animals are self-aware, but we basically have this part of the brain called the default mode network. And what the default mode network does is allows us to think about ourselves. So the next thing that happens is sometimes the default mode network goes haywire. And what it does is looks at outside stimuli and looks at those outside stimuli through the lens of self-reflection. So we see this in depression, where, for example, like if I have a depressed, let's say, grandparent who's 65 years old and starts to think, oh, like my family would be better off without me. So those kinds of thoughts actually come from a default mode network gone haywire. They're looking at their family, they're looking at all these problems that their family has, and they are somehow inserting themselves into these problems. They somehow make everything their fault. So when the default mode network is very hyperactive, it sort of attributes everything else that's happening in the world to you because your self-reflective capacity is stuck in the on position. We also see sort of a hyperactive default mode network with like narcissistic people who think that everything is about them. Everything that's happening, oh, this person at the checkout counter is being so cruel to me. Like they don't think for a second that the reason that this person is behaving this way has nothing to do with me. Because when the default mode network is on, we're always thinking about ourselves, right? So we start to attribute all kinds of things. Oh, that professor is like cruel to me because like they're so like judgmental and things like that. Or that when the default mode network is on, we don't see a narcissistic side. We see like another kind of ego, which is sort of like a very weak or like downtrodden ego. Oh, I don't want to inconvenience the professor. I don't want to ask anyone for help. We see this a lot in people who ask for letters of recommendation. So I'll have patients that have anxiety or depression, and their default mode network will become active and they'll think about, oh, I don't want to inconvenience the professor by asking for a letter of recommendation. They have better things to do. There are more people that are important than me. I don't deserve this. But it's also thinking about me, 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 me. And they're also making really broad generalizations that like, they're going to be drastically inconveniencing the professor if they ask for a letter of recommendation. They don't think for a second that part of the professor's job is writing letters of recommendation. Right? That's like literally part of their job description. You're not inconveniencing them. You're not making it all about you. It's just like part of their job. But when the default mode network is active, we see these two versions of ego. One is the narcissistic ego, and one is sort of like the doormat ego, for lack of a better term. And the doormat ego is still always thinking about itself, right? It's thinking about like, oh my God, like I ruined this. It's always thinking about itself. I ruined that. I'm making this person's life so hard. I'm inconveniencing this person so much. It's still ego, but it's like a negative ego. It's the doormat ego. So what's happening in this post? So this person is making everything in a sense relate to them, right? Because I know this sounds kind of weird, but like, let's just read this carefully. Okay? So, I couldn't speak, couldn't look at anyone, nothing. So I'm sitting there with a clean plate, and then my mom says, I don't feel so good, and starts crying. Now, what is the differential diagnosis for a parent crying during Thanksgiving? Right? Like, why could they start crying at the dinner table? Is it because you're sitting there with a clean plate? Like, that's definitely a possibility. It could be because you're not eating, right? But it could be for any number of other reasons. It may have nothing to do with you. Maybe you kind of mentioned up here that it's not a full house. Maybe someone is missing. Maybe a grandparent passed away. Maybe there are all kinds of reasons why your mom could start crying. Maybe that has to do with like you not eating. Here's another kind of interesting example or thing to think about, data point. So anxiety tends to run in families, right? So like there's a genetic correlation with anxiety. So maybe what's going on is that your mom suffers from anxiety like you do. And when she sees you eating with a clean plate, maybe your mom starts to inject all kinds of negative thoughts into why the plate is clean. Maybe your mom is thinking, oh my God, like I've made the wrong food again. I screwed up. This person isn't eating because I forgot that this and this. And they're kind of beating themselves up in their own mind. And that's why they start crying. And so in a sense, maybe you caused it, but it really has more to do with your mom doing the same exact thing that you're doing, which is that it's all my fault, right? So here you are, son or daughter, thinking, oh my God, it's all my fault. I ruined Thanksgiving. And there's mom sitting there thinking exactly the same thing. Oh my God, I ruined Thanksgiving. I didn't make the right food. Or maybe it's something else. We have no idea. So what happens in the anxious mind is that the default mode network becomes active. It's all about me. Everything that happens gets interpreted and it's always all my fault. Combine that with a cognitive filter for negative things and you have a recipe for disaster. What do I mean by cognitive filter for negative things? So when you are anxious or depressed, your mind will selectively pay attention to negative stimuli. So Thanksgiving is a long process, right? Like who knows, like what happened an hour before? What happened 2 hours before? Did you ruin Thanksgiving or was everyone having a good time? Like what was happening there? But your mind doesn't think about all that stuff, right? Your mind doesn't like think about all of the other possibilities. There's a negative cognitive filter which lets in the negative information, which then your doormat ego is going to take responsibility for. Everything becomes my fault. It's a recipe for disaster and absolutely screws up people's experience of life if they have anxiety. So like this is a situation where we're going to kind of give you a couple of tips. The first is to recognize that the conclusions that the anxious mind comes to by definition are going to be incorrect, right? Because the anxious mind is not thinking logically. It thinks it's thinking logically, but it's not really thinking logically. It's thinking anxiously. It's thinking emotionally. Once you sort of consider the doormat ego plus the cognitive bias filter that you have, you're going to be highlighting the worst situation and ignoring all of the good stimuli, right? Like all the times where your mom is like, oh, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad everyone came. Maybe your mom said things like that. Maybe they didn't. And this is where even your mind will logically be potentially swatting those things away, right? It'll say, oh yeah, my mom was happy to see me, but... And therein lies, like, once again, the logical thinking that is hijacked by emotion and hijacked by ego. And so all this stuff kind of like comes together and creates the situation where you feel like you've ruined Thanksgiving. So what should you do in this situation? So this is very good. So Revelation V said she could have asked what's wrong, or he could have asked what's wrong, right? We don't know the gender of this person. So this is where I would say that like this is where communication is like the antidote to anxiety. So if you're concerned that you screwed something up or you're concerned about other, like, you know, how your mom is feeling or whether your friends like you, you can talk to them. Now, why does the anxious mind not like this? Because it is terrified that it could be right. So the anxious mind would prefer to live in ignorance with the suspicion that you're right, as opposed to find out once and for all, because it really believes that you screwed up Thanksgiving. And so the mind is like, if I ask them like, oh, you can just ask your mom, hey, did I screw up Thanksgiving? But the anxious person is like, oh my God, the only refuge I have, the last bastion of my sanity is the possibility that I could be wrong, right? Because it's possible in the deep, dark corners of my mind, it's possible I didn't ruin Thanksgiving. And there's a chance of that salvation. But if I ask mom, did I ruin Thanksgiving? Then there's a chance I lose that hope. So asking the question, communicating with mom is akin to giving up hope, right? You could lose hope once and for all and be doomed to discover that you were right all along and that you ruined Thanksgiving. So this is tricky. The anxious mind is a very, very dangerous beast, right? So unfortunately, you still have to communicate, right? Because overcoming anxiety is acknowledging that fear and kind of like living up to it. And the good news is that most of the time, People who are anxious, who actually communicate with other people, discover that there's more to it. Okay? Most of the time, the reality is not nearly as bad as what you expected it to be. Excuse me. Dr. K is hungry. So I know it's very terrifying to try to talk to your mom, but I think like in the spirit of Thanksgiving and family dynamics and things that we were never taught, communicating with your family is really, really important, right? So like this is the kind of situation where I would go to your mom and I would say, hey, I noticed you were upset. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on, right? So don't go in and assume that you screwed up Thanksgiving. Just ask them an open-ended question. Can you help me understand what's going on? Because here's the other interesting thing is that you have the opportunity in that moment to actually help your mom. You may think you ruined Thanksgiving, but let's assume that your hypothesis is correct. And then you assume that the reason that your mom is upset is because you weren't eating any food, and she thinks she screwed up. So let's assume that's correct for a moment. So this is a good opportunity for you to explain to your mom that actually the reason that I'm not eating is not because I don't want to eat. I love the food and I'm grateful that you made it. It's because I have crippling anxiety that causes me to lock up. And actually it's a physiologic response. And then you are going to print out this paper and show it to mom, because this is fascinating, all right? Random paper. Scared stiff. Catatonia is an evolutionary-based fear response. So if you are anxious and you fall into this category of freezing, right? Like at Thanksgiving, I feel like after food was set on the table, everyone sat down, including myself. We began eating, except I wasn't eating. Everyone around me had a full plate except for me. I couldn't move my body to make my plate and eat in front of anyone. This was literally, you were frozen stiff. What is this? This is an evolutionary-based fear response. Okay, so this is wild. So this proposal, consistent with K.L. Kalboom's original conception, is based on similarities between catatonia and tonic immobility, death faint, as well as evidence that catatonia is associated with anxiety. So what does this mean? Okay, this is kind of whack, but a very cool paper. So for those of you that lock up when you get anxious, okay, I know it's kind of weird. If you lock up, you're not busted. This is literally your body's evolutionary response. So human beings have this protective response that when they feel like they are in danger, we freeze up. So I don't know if you guys have heard this, but if you get attacked by a grizzly bear, what are you supposed to do? You're not supposed to run away. You're supposed to lay down and curl into a ball and play dead. And then like this really confuses me because I'm like, aren't I just going to get eaten if I don't fight back? Like, isn't the grizzly bear just going to kill me? Like, how is playing dead a survival technique? Possums do this, okay? So a lot of animals will play dead to survive, which is kind of bizarre. Like, you'd think that you just get eaten, but no. It actually is a survival technique, which is why human beings have this freeze response, which is actually a survival mechanism. So we see this in trauma. When people get sexually assaulted, they dissociate and go into a freeze response. When people become catatonic, it's hypothesized that this is a freeze response, which is a survival mechanism. When you get anxious, right? So remember, anxiety is fear. And so even though you're sitting at a dinner table, you have these like circuits in your brain that are like 10 million years old and were designed to like help you survive other situations, which is when we're in danger, when we're anxious, when we're afraid, just don't do anything, lock up. And so it becomes very hard to do something, right? So I want you guys to envision that you're a human being who's being attacked by a grizzly bear. And when the grizzly bear like smacks you with its paw, the reflex is to be like, ouch, and run away. But in order to make you survive, we have an even stronger catatonic fear response, which causes you to lock up. So I want y'all to imagine like how powerful does this self-induced paralysis have to be to keep you not moving when you're being gnawed on by a grizzly bear? Like think about how much paralysis your brain is like sending into your body to survive in that situation. It's like, don't move a damn muscle, even if you wanted to. Every fiber of your being is saying, run, 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 fight, fight, fight. But you have this evolutionary catatonic response that's like, we're going to override all that, and you're just going to sit there and do absolutely nothing. No matter what you want to do, I don't care that you're about to die. We're not going to let you move. And it is because the stronger that response is, the more people survive. Because the people that fought back, the people that ran away, were the ones that freaked out the grizzly bear. Grizzly bear killed him, ate him. Right? So this is strong evolution that we're not aware of when we have anxiety. We don't realize. We just think we're idiots. We're like, how stupid am I? Like, I can't even like pick up the spoon and like eat some turkey. Right? But this is the thing, is we don't understand that this is what our body is designed to do. So this is where what you do is you go and you have a conversation with mom. First of all, you understand this about yourself, that you're not like an idiot. This is just a fear response that has become inappropriately activated. You have a conversation with your mom, explain to your, try to find out why she was crying. I think there's a 50% chance or greater that has nothing to do with you and the clean plate. In the event that it has something to do with you and the clean plate, you can share with your mom that you actually appreciate everything that she's done. She didn't screw up Thanksgiving. That's why she started crying, right? Because you think she thinks she screwed up Thanksgiving, and you made her feel that way, which is why you think you screwed up Thanksgiving. But you just explain to your mom that, hey, like, I have anxiety. It's nothing to do with your food. So this is the other big thing. So now I'm going to teach y'all an OP technique for healthy human relationships. Okay, what's going on with our lighting here? I feel like we need lighting is all messed up. My auto adjust for camera is just like all over the place. So here's the OP. GG, I'm out. No OP technique. Okay. So if you want to help other people in your family feel better, one of the best ways to help another human being is to let them help you. This is the most OP and underutilized technique. So I'm going to give y'all an example. So back in the day, I used to have my grandmother visit me when I was like in college and like in med school and stuff like that. She would visit, and then she's like an old lady, right? So like she would ask me like, what do you want me to make you for dinner? And I'm like, don't make me anything. Like, don't trouble yourself. There I am trying to like explain to my grandmother who's like 78. I'm like, you don't need to make it. I'll cook dinner. Like, why don't you relax? And then like she would get super bent out of shape. And then like every time she came over, I would be like, don't bother. Like, I'll make dinner. Like, I want you to relax. Like, she's like, what do you want to eat? What do you want to eat? What do you want to eat? And I'm like, whatever's easy, whatever's easy, whatever's easy. And then thankfully I married a brilliant woman who was like, do you see what you're doing? And I was like, no, I don't see what I'm doing. What do you mean? She's like, you're making their lives a living hell. They've like traveled, they've flown thousands of miles to come to you in Boston, and all your grandmother wants to do is cook for you. Like, you just need to tell her, like, it doesn't matter. Just say something and then eat 2 plates of it and then tell her it was delicious. Like, you were making things so hard. Just like tell her that it doesn't matter. Just say something, but let her cook for you. It doesn't, even if it's hard. And I'm like, but I don't want her to cook for me. Like, she's like old and tired. And she's like, dude, do you understand that the more exhausted she is at the end of the meal, like, and the more you eat, the more like purpose her trip is going to have. Because she's going to feel tired in every bone in her body, but it was worth it. And instead, like, you're just having her come up here and sit around, and she's like, what did I, like, there's nothing going on. Right? So I was like, oh, wow, like, that's amazing. And so then, like, basically, like, let her work for you. Like, it's like, if that's what she came up here to do, don't put her through it all, but, help out and stuff like that. So you don't, like, actually want your grandmother, like, working all day to feed you. But do something, let her do something for you. And so one of the best things you can do, like, if you really want to help people feel better, is let them help you. So we see this in our community. Where do people get self-esteem in our community? It's not just from people like telling them, hey man, you're awesome, like, forgive yourself. It's also people helping other people in our community. Like, our coaches feel like pretty good about themselves. And why is that? Because they have self-esteem problems. They start coaching, they work through some of their self-esteem problems, and then they start to like really realize they have value in this world because they're helping other human beings. So the most OP technique that you can use is let other people help you. It will help them feel good about themselves. It'll let them have dignity. I may cross the line a little bit too much with this, but like, for example, I have a friend visiting for Thanksgiving. And so, he's like there, and like, we're like cooking and cleaning and doing laundry and stuff like that, and feeding him, like driving him around and all this good stuff. And like, when he asks to help, I'll say yes. I'll be like, sure. Like, or they'll like start emptying the dishwasher and I'll be like, hey, thanks for doing that. I won't tell him, hey, sit down, stop doing that. And he's not, we're doing more work than he is for sure in terms of hosting him, but that's totally fine because he's going to feel so good because he's not like I'm sitting around and just being like a freeloader. Like, let him contribute, right? And so like, let other people help you and offer other people help and accept other people's help. It is the best, it is the most OP technique. And so when people come around, like, because people don't want to feel like freeloaders. So this is a big thing that we really believe in it, or I don't know if we believe it at HD. I believe it. So I don't believe in charity. I know it sounds kind of weird, but like, I think there's a basic problem with charity, which is that there's like a giver and there's a receiver, right? There's like I am like, look at how generous I am. And then like the person who's like, oh, please, master, like, please, oh, sir, can I, like, it's so like undignified. Right? So it doesn't mean that you should charge people. You, by all means, like, give people gifts, give people support, but like, don't make them feel like it's a handout, right? It should be done like with dignity and received with dignity. It's not like I'm being charitable to you. It's just like, hey man, I'm sorry that this sucks for you. Like, let me help you out. It's not like, oh my God, like I'm doing some great task, right? It's this attitude of you would do the same for me. So it's karma. Like, it just so happens that in this life, I have more than you do. It's not like I'm being a wonderful human being. It's just like, it's the way that the game is played. You would do the same for me. So give people a sense of dignity. Give people a sense of support. If you want to help someone, let them help you. And express appreciation. Make sense? Questions? So I know the anxiety thing was kind of all over the place. So let me summarize. So sometimes people feel like they ruin things and they have really bad anxiety. What's going on there? So the first is that people who are anxious have a cognitive filter that selects for the negative events. The second thing is they have this special kind of like ego that attributes everything that happens around them to them. That's what the anxious mind does. It's not their fault. It's just the anxious mind is always thinking about how did I screw up? How did I screw up? Did I screw up? That in turn has to do with the default mode network. So we literally have a part of our brain that is very self-referential and always thinks about us. So when we become anxious, when we become depressed, that part of the brain becomes hyperactive. By the way, gets disabled by things like psilocybin and ketamine, right? So all these novel psychiatric like therapies, like hallucinogens and things like that, act by disabling the default mode network, which is how they help people with anxiety and depression. Meditation also disables the default mode network. A la the Shunya meditation that we just taught you a little while ago, that is like, here's literally how you become egoless. Right? So that shuts off the default mode network in a big way. So the default mode network makes you responsible for everything that happens around you. That combined with your cognitive filter, combined with your catatonic fear response that paralyzes you and makes you unable to act, is a recipe for disaster, and you're to blame. At the end of the day, though, that may not actually be the case. So how do you fix that? You communicate with people, right? So even though it's terrifying, because why do you avoid communication? You avoid communication because you could be right, and you don't want to be right. You want to be wrong, right? So the second that you have a conversation with someone, you're letting go of the possibility, the hope that maybe you're wrong. All these terrifying thoughts in your head, maybe you're wrong. But the second you talk to them, that hope could disappear forever, because they may tell you, yes, you ruined Thanksgiving. How dare you? And that would be devastating. So it's your avoidance of that communication which actually ends up screwing you, because then you never really find out. Maybe it has nothing to do with you. Maybe mom has other things going on. And this is the other huge thing that's awesome. Even if you are to blame in some level, that communication starts the healing process. It builds the bridge that both of you, so even if you screwed things up, you can say, I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for ruining Thanksgiving. And then your mom will say, I accept your apology. I love you anyway. You didn't screw up Thanksgiving. Then y'all hug, you both cry, everyone feels great, and then you go and have a piece of pie. Got it? Done? Easy? Okay. Y'all get it? Okay. So, couple of things before, who are we rating? And a couple things before we sign off. So the first is like, so you can gift Dr. K's guide. So if you guys know people who like struggle with this kind of stuff, or you struggle with this kind of stuff, highly, highly recommend you watch the anxiety guide. So it goes into a lot of these different things. This stuff that I'm talking about, if y'all are interested in this doormat ego, watch the Vedic psychology stuff in Dr. K's guide. It'll explain ahamkar and ego and identity. Also, a lot of stuff that we covered today in terms of like shunya and stuff like that. There's the Atman Pada, which is the path of self, which explores like what is the nature of self and like what is the ego and that kind of stuff. What is my identity? There's also a path of motivation. So I definitely, and then if you guys are interested in the default mode network stuff and like understanding like how that works with depression, there's several videos about that in the depression guide. So check it out if y'all are interested. If you know someone who may be interested, I know it's kind of a weird gift to give people. Hey, by the way, I got you this thing because you're fucking depressed, you know? But seriously, like if it's something that, you know, you either you relate to or you think people may benefit from, check it out. Okay. Chris Urace says this is the best stream on Twitch. Literally, thank you. You are very welcome, Chris Urace, and thank you for letting us know that it's helpful to you. You guys see that? Like, I feel good. Like this person, by the way, if you guys were curious about this, the reason that this stream is so good, even from my perspective, is because y'all take care of me. You guys get that? It's like messages like that helps me. Seriously, like that's good. It's like good reinforcement. Here I am on a Saturday, you know, like a couple days after Thanksgiving, wondering, was this worth it? Like I've got my kids and I have family visiting and stuff like that, right? And so it's like, is this worth it? Like, should I do this? I felt like I owed y'all a stream, but yeah, like it's worth it. And you guys help me, like y'all help me. Like that's significant. I don't think y'all realize that you're the energy, right? You're what recharges my mana battery. I will continue doing this as long as it continues helping people. But I just need to know that, because then it's like makes the sacrifice worth it. You help me do my dharma, so I'm grateful for that because it makes my life easy. I feel good. I'm like, oh my God, like you guys get this? There's a noble sacrifice boner. It's like, oh, I sacrificed 2 hours of my day, but this person has helped. Therefore, it was good, right? So it's like, it's cool. Like it helps me feel good about myself. So thank you for that. Who are we rating, chat? It's not really a noble sacrifice. I'm memeing there. This is fun. All right, so we're going to raid Crispy Life 22. Crispy Life. How are we not going to raid? Okay. Let's go Crispy Life 22. Not to be confused with Crispy Life 21. Love y'all, chat. We'll see y'all on Monday with regular stream.